thank you guys so much for being here. Here today we have Nicholeen Peck and Porter Peck. And I personally am so excited. And my wife Simone is so excited because we've been following along and trying to learn from you. And to get you here with us is just fantastic. And then when we were talking with you, you had told us that we might get Porter. And
yeah, I mean, it was really good timing. When you reached out to me, he was almost home. And I was like, well, Porter could be there. Yeah.
And then it was even some added pressure, Porter. Nicholeen was like, Porter would be great for this. And I'm like, okay, yes. We're gonna move forward.
Yeah.
But on top of that, so Nicholeen, we wanted to have you on. Nicholeen is the expert on teaching self-government. She has authored 2 books in particular that we've used, and specifically that's Roles. And then the second one is Parenting a House United. So Nicholeen, I just wanted to kind of jump in and have you just kind of start the conversation, specifically talking about what is self-government. And then we'll jump over and get some insights from Porter too, because I'm curious his side of things.
For sure. Yeah. Self-government is all about everything that we do. And really all true freedom comes from the idea of self-mastery, self-control, self-government. Okay. So it is one of those words that sometimes is associated with government, but it really goes back to the individual. So self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation, and then possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So that means you understand cause and effect, like, not just if I throw it up, it must come down, but also if I yell at a person, they're going to retreat from me a little bit. That's going to put a distance in our relationship. They're not sure if they can trust me, right? So then I have to also, the second part, be evaluating myself all the time, which means that I'm going to engage in self-correction with myself. I'm going to be thinking, is this thought process I'm having about this actually healthy? Is this good? Does this take me toward my goals and the person I think that I ought to be?
Awesome. What'd you add, Porter?
I mean, that's great, right?
Add to the expert.
Yeah, I mean, just like, I don't really know anything different. So, because it was already in place when I was born, right? All that type of thing. So just living with it and seeing, obviously, outside perspective, seeing like maybe my friends or just people I interact with, it makes a huge difference on your relationships and just what I do with myself, right? Yeah. Based on everyone else.
Yeah.
One thing with Porter is he's really good at solving problems. Like if he is supposed to work for somebody, say for instance, and he's like, I got to put in this much work. And if they give him an assignment, say, get this thing done, and he gets done with it, but he knows he still has to be there at work, he starts problem solving what comes next. Okay, what needs to be done? What do I do? And he just can do that because he is used to the environment in our home growing up was all about how do you solve your problems? Where are we going from here? It wasn't just short term or short view, but we also had that long view always in everything that we did.
So, and then in addition to this, right, you explained everything and simplifying for my own purposes, right? But it's self-awareness and capacity to self-manage, right?
Right.
And then you just talked about, but there's also this proactive element where it's not just kind of experiencing life and then, being aware of how we're experiencing life, but also purposefully living life and not just experiencing, but driving or kind of moving towards something, right?
Absolutely. Tons of proactive emphasis. So I think a lot of people actually end up damaging their relationships by always staying on the reactive side of everything that's happening all the time. And they don't solve their problems well by waiting for there to always be a problem before they think, how am I going to solve this next thing? If you have the proactive, then you're going to be much more successful with everything.
Yeah. And that honestly, it sounds like the world's current approach to everything, that we're going to react rather than be proactive, which is...
We're obsessed with it.
Yeah.
To the point that people are saying, no, you got to really feel what you're feeling. You got to really give into it. You got to let it win out. You got to let it... Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And it's someone, and we're having people now who are going and looking for trauma. Where's your trauma? Does everyone have to have trauma? What if there is a person who experienced something that was hard, a hardship, which is different than trauma, by the way. Seeing somebody in a foxhole next to you, their head blown off, that's trauma. having somebody not give you the time of day when you wanted to talk to them, that's just a little hardship. And that's part of regular life, right? But now we have this obsession with finding all of these feelings everywhere so that people actually stop themselves from getting proactive at all.
You know, just sitting here and like learning about this and hearing it, it's like, well, this is modern psychology, where we're going to dig in. And as a psychologist and so somebody who's practiced psychology, it's something that we see a lot, where we're going to dig and we're going to identify. And I think that there's a lot of problems in that, in just the nature of, you know, we're going to go back and label things in your past. And, you know, there's some truth to some of those aspects and things that may be traumatic and have an impact on our lives, right? They impact
Of course.
the way that
I mean,
we
I took
interact
in
with
foster
people.
children
Yeah.
and we dealt with a lot of trauma. Trauma is absolutely real, but not everything is trauma, and not every feeling has to be focused on to get over it either. And that's where we've just missed our mark, you know, as a society. And in an effort to be so understanding and to help people get through things, we've gone so far that we've started to create more of a problems in the hearts and minds of our young people, and quite frankly, even in the parents. The parents are feeling so entitled in their relationships in their homes that they're not able to connect properly with their own children. And so it's gotten to a place where it's unhealthy.
Yeah. And Porter, you made a comment about that when we had started up, was just that as you've interacted with your friends, that you've seen a difference in how they do things, and then how you, just in your home and in the way that you were brought up and the things and the skills that you learned, that there's a big difference. What was like the big thing that you saw between your friends growing up and then just kind of moving on into life?
I mean, there's a bunch. I would say the big one is the proactiveness, right? And then just like maturity too, right? So and I think one leads to the other. If you're proactive, it's just going to kind of, maturity is going to come more naturally because you're looking for things that's an adult skill, that's something that you have to do, right? If you want to be successful or anything like that. And that goes so far into the mission too, obviously, right? With companions and things. But as far as just like friends go, and like, I guess like relationships too, right? I'd see like my friends, I worked with a couple of my friends at like my first job, and they would be done, they just like sit there on maybe their phone or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh man, like I just feel like I did it maybe like once, and I was like, I just feel pointless. Like, why am I getting paid for this? Why am I here? Right. And so that's when I started to do things, to go find things to do. And I mean, it made a huge difference with my relationship with my managers, my relationship with like my friends' parents, even like when I'm at their house, things like that. So it's just a huge difference.
He knows how to self-direct, right? He can give himself an instruction and follow through with that instruction. He can give himself a no answer and follow through with that no answer. And like, technology is huge. If a person can't have a device and say no answer, then the thing is going to control them. And he was determined that it wasn't going to control him. In fact, even I would say from a really young age, he would say to me, I remember when he was about 10 and we were part of a group, and I thought this was the greatest group ever. It was like other people that were interested in things like he was, and we were learning things, and I was in charge of it. And he came up to me and said, Mom, I think we need to find new friends, new people. And I was thinking, whoa, these are all people that they believe the same as us and everything. How can we find better? And he's like, Mom, when we're all just sitting there waiting for class to start and stuff, he said, they're all just talking about gaming. Mom, I have to have somebody who is going to talk about regular life. And I was like, and he was like 10.
Wow.
You know, and it's because that wasn't our life. And he knew what regular life was, and he knew they were getting caught up in not regular life.
There's much more deeper conversation you can have than that.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's something that I struggle with too, where we get into these day-to-day interactions where people, they're talking about things that just don't matter.
Yeah, just like fluff.
Yeah, fluff, right? And then there's this point in where you're sitting there, and it's like, I want to have a conversation about, the purpose of life, or how did, at what point do people become people? What separates us from, animals, or just like have deeper conversations where it's, thoughts and pushing our minds to be a little bit better rather than, the football game. I do like football. I do like basketball. I like all these sports, but just, sometimes it's nice to just have deeper conversations that don't revolve around those things. So did people, I'm gonna be a little rude. Did people call you weird for that?
Oh yeah. I mean, there was a couple. Most of them probably didn't say like, "Oh, you're weird," right? But they were just kind of like, they probably said, "Oh, that's weird that I wasn't talking about that, or I didn't want to talk about that," right? Well, probably the main thing was that I couldn't because I didn't play video games, right? Yeah, and so, like, I could talk about maybe Mario Kart, played it once or twice, but that was, so far they weren't talking about that, right? And so I just felt bored because, number one, I couldn't talk about it, and then I saw that, well, there's no point to this conversation.
So and
the thing is this leads to the maturity. So he was saying one of the big things he noticed was maturity, but you can see that even if he's a 10-year-old boy and he's approaching me and he's saying, "Mom, we got to find new people to talk to," and he's noticing there's no point to this when he's young, that shows you what type of a maturity he had, because he could deductively reason this stuff out because he'd seen something different.
Yeah. So I just love going on tangents. I love just kind of engaging in conversations. So with that, and Nicholeen, you might have more insight than Porter, just because, as an outsider, do you feel like that was more of kind of the nature that's just how Porter is, or was it the teaching self-government model that you guys do in the house?
That's a really good question, because, I have 4 children of my own. And then we brought in teens. They were foster children for many years. And of course, we saw a lot of different reactions to learning skills of self-government, learning how to self-regulate and be calm and stuff like that. But by and large, even though all 4 of my children are very different, one thing they all have in common is they're strong-willed. Whether they're going to fight against you or whether they're going to fight themselves, they're strong-willed. They all have that in common. But they do have different personalities. And I will say that his personality is heavy on duty. When he puts his mind to something, he's going to stick to it. And he also, because he was the youngest, so I think this makes a difference too on, like, sometimes birth order can factor in a few things, right? So he's the youngest. He sees his siblings and all the other people coming in. He's just watching, what's going on and how they handle adulthood. And he's like, not doing that. Oh, that's a good one. I'll do that. Oh, point taken. And he has no problem learning from other people. Yeah. And I do think that a big, like, speaking, like you said, kind of from the mom view of this, I do think part of that is because from the time when he was just little, we always could talk about anything. I didn't just do parenting to my children. It was just a way of living that we had in our family. It was like, we discuss stuff. We discuss our relationship. We discuss our family relationship. We discuss our goals, the short term, the long term. We discuss what went wrong, and nobody ever has a big deal out of it. There's no emotional outbursts. We just discuss things. And so he's so used to talking to me about things that when he would see things with his siblings too, he would come and he would say, so-and-so's doing this. Like, what's your take on that, Mom? Like, he would actually come and get some counsel on things sometimes. Yeah. And he's the one who was leading so many people on his mission. He had so many different leadership opportunities. I mean, for a good chunk of the mission, he was leading things. And I think, so even though he knows who to go to counsel, he also knows how to make the decisions and see what's going on because he's had so much conversation. I think a good relationship with your parents and a lot of good discussion leads to a lot of confidence.
Yeah. And in your book, you talk a lot about how confidence is achieved through truth, right? Experiencing truth. Mm-hmm. And then the lack of confidence comes from not having that structure and all those elements in life. But one thing that just keeps standing out is you keep talking about this communication piece. And it's like the communication itself has played a huge role in your life.
Huge. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Totally.
So help me understand kind of the different, or how do I phrase it? The kind of the difference between kind of the conversations that you have with other people versus kind of conversations at home, and the effectiveness and the efficiency and kind of how all that kind of comes to play.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd say first off, the conversations at home are probably more effective because they also have the skills, right? So we're both using the skills with each other, like with the siblings. Yeah. And like communication, in my opinion, that's like the heart of teaching self-government, of everything, right? Because if you can't communicate, it's and like all throughout my life, right, same thing, and that goes into that maturity, right? And really these skills that self-government is just life skills, right? These are just basic, like accepting a no answer, following an instruction, right? That goes into work, to your coworkers, companions, right? Everything. And so, but there's just, people don't know the steps and how to do it. So going into these relationships, or with like my family and my companions, is huge, because being able to communicate with them, right, calmly, and because a lot of people, you might have to bring something up. You have hard companion you struggle with something with, and you're like, okay, look, like we got to talk about this, and they just throw up a wall. Right?
Yeah, it's super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I imagine
to it. They've never had that happen. And the thing is that our modern parenting has done so much coddling, that they have not given their children the opportunity to accept criticism and correction, even from parents who are completely safe. So then if it's somebody else, they're for sure thinking it's not going to be safe.
Going to put up that boundary. So then when you would have these conversations and you start talking to people about it, you talk about there's a difference in skills, right? So they put up the wall, they start pushing back. They've been kind of, coddled a little bit to where they aren't comfortable with these conversations. What was that like working with your companions? Because if you came up to me and you were that strong and just said, right out, just like straight away, if you were my trainer, I'd be like, whoa, this guy, right? But, actually, later on my mission.
He has a ton of tact.
So
just
how did you go through
he's
it?
got great social skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, probably because he was homeschooled, honestly. Just going to throw that out there. We don't have to go down that road.
I'm on board. It's everybody else that we have to talk to about that.
Yeah. No, so, I mean, it really depends on the person, right? So you get to know the person, you kind of know what's going to trigger them, what's not, right? Okay. Just from observation.
Building relationships.
Yeah, building relationships, right? That's obviously a huge part. You can't bring up something they're doing if they don't trust you. Right. So you have to build that trust first, because if then you just come to them with a list of like, okay, this annoys me, this annoys me, this one, they're just going to be like, okay, whatever. Right. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But if you have that trust and you come in, it really and this is exactly what the Savior did too, right? He came in with love first, right? He knew that, like, right, let's say lady caught in adultery, right? He knew that she was sinning, right? He knew she did that, right? But he wasn't all mad about it. He came in with love first, right? He's like, because he cared about her. And so if you go in and because you want your companionship to work, right? Okay, you're like, okay, look, right? This is something that I'm struggling with, and maybe how can we work on this together? So you don't, in my experience, you didn't fully put it on them, because you might have been part of that problem, right? Because it just didn't work. So, like, you go in with love. That's like the main thing. And when you have that trust, usually they're more open. Sometimes, I mean, depending on the person, they were still.
Yeah. you get people, and the catchphrase today is triggered, right?
Yeah.
People get triggered through whatever.
But yeah, no, it was just that ultimate love, and then not just like maybe saying something you like about them too, right? Being like, okay, I really appreciate that you helped me with this. How can I help you with this?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's kind of a disagree appropriately mindset. Yeah. So we're getting into some skills here. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that. So you say disagree appropriately, right? And as we're talking with other people and other people are watching this, they're like, "What is that? What do you mean disagree appropriately? Like tell you you're dumb, or like I don't like that, or just like." Yeah. You have to say it in a nice way. What do you mean?
I mean, if the grown-up way to say disagree appropriately is have good diplomacy, okay? Because everyone needs diplomacy in all of their relationships. But to disagree appropriately, you're calm when you're talking to another person. So you look at the person, and you keep a calm face, voice, and body. So you know what that's like for you. So that means you decide ahead of time, I'm going to have a very crucial conversation here, but I'm not going to make it seem like if I don't get my way, I'm going to die. Or I'm not going to show all my emotions in this. I am just going to think about how much I care about that other person first. And I'm going to keep myself completely calm. So you keep a calm face, voice, and body. He thinks about valuing the other person, which is exactly what I did when I was a parent. When the children would be going out of control, I'd be thinking, I love you. It's okay. Let's work you through this. And even though I wasn't going to allow the behavior, I wasn't going to get emotionally invested in it either. And so that's what you learn to do. So then you say that you understand the other person's point of view.
Yeah.
And then you share your point of view. And so this is where he's saying, okay, well, you've done this thing, which is so awesome. In fact, I've really learned from it. There's something else that I think that I could maybe bring to this, that I could teach you. Are you open to hearing this that I have to say? Right? And so if you show that you understand that somebody's tried, you value what they've already brought to the table, and you're not just looking to pull them down, but you see value there and you express it, and then you express something that is difficult, that's going to go much further. And when missionaries come home, they're going to need that with their parents, with their siblings, with their bosses, roommates. Yeah, it just everybody. Yeah. It's just life, that type of a skill. I mean, you're going to have really bad dating life and marriage if you don't get that skill down.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's not one that we're focusing on. Right. And it's something that we're seeing a lot where, we can't have these conversations and talk about in a kind, loving way when after we've developed a relationship, it's difficult for people to sit there and have these conversations because it's uncomfortable.
People are afraid of contention.
We're focusing on being heard instead of hearing the other people.
Yes. And then this also piece, and you just said it, the contention element. And then as a faith and as a people, we believe that contention is of the devil, right? That Satan kind of comes in and he's kind of inciting us to take offense to things like this. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like, Porter, that as you're talking and as you were working with companions, it was focusing on, I love you, we have a relationship. I think that you have essentially more potential for good. Yeah. And I think that if we could do these things better, then we as a companionship could be better.
Yeah, is that right. Fair? That's the ultimate goal, because obviously your mission president receives revelation for who you're with, right? And so you have to consider that to be like, okay, I'm with this person for a reason, right? Yeah. So obviously you have to think, what am I going to learn from them? But also you have to work, right? You have to work together, or else the work won't work.
So it's not easy?
It's not easy.
But you see the duty that he has and the trust he has in God and in the people who are helping him by saying, well, I'm with this person for a reason. That's a lot of duty, a lot of trust. He doesn't second guess. He takes steps forward. If he knows something's right, he does it. So you asked me earlier, okay, how much of it was nurture? How much of it is nature, right? Yes. Okay, so his nature is pretty awesome because that's how it is. But he also has learned that if you trust the people you're working with, that everyone will become their best. And that was part of the nurture in our family. Yeah. And so anyway, just to kind of bring that back to that too.
No, and to add to it, it's what we're taught in the scriptures, that we have to take a seed, we have to put it in good soil, we have to put it in good ground, we have to nurture it, we have to allow it to develop. And then it's through that experimentation that we develop and kind of develop into XYZ. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's something that we're not pushing as a society. We're just allowing for our seeds to be cast, out there. And then as they're out there, we're working through and trying to process that information or live our life or experiment with what we're dealing with. And it's not coming to fruition. We're not experiencing the life that we had imagined or hoped for. Mm-hmm. So as part of teaching self-government, one thing that's really vital is having a vision, right? Mm-hmm. Looking forward to something in the future that we're striving to live up to, right? So then as a missionary, that's one thing that is kind of provided to you. You have, your purpose as a missionary, and it kind of talks about that. As you were growing up, that was something that you were comfortable with, having kind of a vision, having a purpose, having a mission, these kinds of things. what was that like, having your experience and then working with other missionaries who hadn't experienced that yet?
Yeah. I guess for me, of having that growing up, right? That's a goal, right? Your vision is a goal, and your mission statement, whatever, that's a goal, right? And so, and something that missionaries are super familiar with, or at least hope they are, right? is having goals, but then making plans to achieve those goals, because a goal is nothing without a plan.
Yeah.
Right. And so we had that goal, right? And so we were doing things to get there. We had a plan too. And so transitioning into the missionary purpose, right, to invite others to come into Christ, through faith and repentance, right? Ultimately, that's your goal is to help them make covenants, right? And to invite them to come closer to Christ. It gives you in the purpose of a missionary, it gives you the goal
Very
and the
clear.
plan.
Yeah.
Right. And so it felt like, obviously it was different, but it felt like I was like, okay, I can do this. Familiar, right? And so that's why I think I caught on to it so quick, because I already had that. Whereas people are like companions or people in the mission that maybe didn't, it was harder for them to catch the vision. And yeah. And I had like a pilot program in my mission that was a whole different vision, right? It was the Ammon approach, so we'd serve first. And so I had to catch that really fast too, because they just dropped me in and they're like, all right, go. And I was like, wait, what?
He had to start and do all these things. And if something didn't work, start something else. And I mean, he had to innovate. He had to get all the people moving. He had to round up people that had never been part of the church before and figure out where are they going to meet and what are they going to do. And
What does it look like? Who are these people?
Yeah. And
All
how
of
do
it.
I help these people who are in this place in their life get to a spot where they can understand the gospel and what church even means when we don't even have a fully functioning church, because he had to start one.
Yeah. And so, off of like a 5-minute conversation, right? He was like, all right, I'm calling you to this area. This is what you're doing. You leave on Tuesday. I was like, oh, okay. Right. And so obviously there's a lot of figuring out that has to go into that, but having like a vision that you already, so then I had to incorporate 2 visions, right? The missionary purpose and the like serving and bring people to Christ, right? And so really adapting, right? So if you have that foundation of the family vision, right, then it's a lot easier to adapt and to build off of other visions or other goals that you have in your life, to make plans for that.
Yeah, and to live with it and to move forward, take those steps. So then, and the thought that I keep having and that it keeps coming to mind is, when we're working with, and we did a survey, we did some research and just went out and asked 100 return missionaries kind of what was the hardship, what was difficult about returning home from the mission. And the number one thing that people said when they came home was a lack of purpose. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me that in this context, right, of the conversation, that your life, your kind of the family dynamic, the family economy system, just all these different pieces that come into play, that was just a part of who you were. So these things were familiar. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just making a broad assumption that when you came home, you continued and developed, and you had to transition and kind of make anew, and you're working on the next step. But most return missionaries don't.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so true. Yeah,
because vision is actually a big thing. So I mean, he's throwing out all kinds of talking around certain concepts, but the concepts that I teach for a parent who's establishing a family, it's going to be the same concepts for a person in any phase of their life, right? So that idea of the vision is something that everybody should do. And for a family, we made a 20-year vision. Yeah. And actually, we're almost to the end of that. Like next year is the end of our family's 20-year vision, which is crazy. Anyway, so we made a 20-year vision. And then we made a mission statement, something that we would say every day to remind us how we were going to get there. And then we had regular meetings or checkups where we would say, okay, so how are we doing at becoming that type of a family? Are there any problems that need to be solved? And in our culture, we call that a council, right? Yeah. Right, a family council. And we were very effective at our family councils. We loved them, and we knew how to go through them and not have them turn into family fights and disagreements and things like that. And so it was something where we really did feel like we bonded together at the times where we were having those discussions. And so just that whole environment, and then meeting with him on a regular basis, having his own mentor meetings, those were other times where he would set a vision or a plan ahead. So now he's going to university and he's like, okay, well, what's my vision for university? What's my vision for this next phase of my life? And it's a supernatural thing for him to do because it was part of life. But if nobody's ever done that before, I think that's why that they have an exit interview with the mission president, to try to help them have a vision of what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, an attempt.
Yeah, like the My Plan program. I think that's exactly why that is.
Yeah, and you know, and I think that the church is really working on trying to be able to understand and create systems in place to be able to help with that. Unfortunately, it's still so uncomfortable for people. And people, you know, they may start the My Plan and then it gets dropped after, you know, being home for a little bit. Or just like all these different things that we're noticing with return missionaries, that they're sitting there saying, like, one that came up when we were starting the program was, I feel like the church just dropped me off after I provided them 2 years of my life. And it's just kind of these concepts.
Because the structure's gone.
Yeah.
See, that's what it is they can have a vision when the structure supports the vision.
Exactly.
But when the home life, the parents have their vision of what they think they're doing. They've not articulated it maybe. They're just going along. And then each person in the family has their own, like, well, I'm going to do this for me and I'm going to do this for me. Now suddenly they don't have a structure. And so then they don't know where the vision is. Even if they talked about it with the mission president, if they don't have a structure that supports it or somebody that understands what it means to have a vision, they're going to struggle. There are key things that a person needs to have in order to have a really good vision. So number one, they need a picture in their mind of themselves actually doing something for the future. So there has to be action involved. It can't just be like, passive. Well, I want to be this kind of a person, right? Like, oh, I want to be really kind. I want people to like me. That's not a vision. Or like, you know, I want to find someone to marry. That's not really as much of a vision. A vision is something that is, you can measure it. You can quantify it over time. So you have to say, well, I see myself meeting new people everywhere I go. I see myself introducing myself to other people. And the more people I meet, the more I'm going to get close to finding that person. And so for the vision, you're going to want to visualize you, before you have a social engagement, going and talking to people you don't know. That's real vision. It has to be something that has an action part of it and that is measurable. So if you didn't actually do it, you can go back to the vision stage and give yourself a new instruction, basically, because that's what you're doing with those small short-term visions that get toward the long-term goal. Is you're actually giving yourself another instruction and then evaluating, giving yourself feedback on that. So you're actually self-correcting or praising yourself, and then you're giving yourself a new instruction. Because here's the deal. When you come home and you're an adult, you have to parent yourself now. And on the mission, you did, but you didn't, because there was that framework.
You did, but you didn't.
I think missionaries realize the importance of a vision, right? If they didn't have one before, right? On the mission, they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, right? Because you feel fulfilled. You're like, I'm doing something, Yeah,
and just to jump in, but people don't really accomplish things. Mm-hmm. So then, you know, you're living the vision and the mission of a missionary, and then you start to feel fulfillment because you're like, oh, I'm accomplishing, I'm doing. And, you know, not to cut you off, but I just want to throw that in because there's so many people that they don't have the opportunity until finally they're on their mission. They're like, holy cow, I'm capable.
Right? And it feels good, right? It feels amazing.
Because you feel yourself grow.
Yeah. You feel your testimony grow. You feel deeper conversion. You're helping other people, right? And then when they come home, they want to have a vision, but they don't really know where they fit in, right? And something I was told is like, all right, as a missionary, you're the guy, right? Everyone knows who you are. All the members are like, oh, the missionaries, right? When you come home, you're a member, right? Every member is supposed to be a missionary, but it's a whole different. So it's keeping like that righteous habits that you had, right? And really just, I guess, making a new vision, right? Yeah. What's my new vision to incorporate my old vision, right? How can I keep that, but
and how can I still minister?
Transition. Yeah.
So one thing that is I don't want to say this in the wrong way, I guess, but his whole mission, I was also having significant missionary experiences. So
Yeah.
I love missionary work. I love it. And I love to minister to people because I'm an outgoing person and I've always figured God made me this way for a reason. So I guess I better do something with it. If I don't, then I'm hiding under a bushel. So I can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've always been the one that would introduce myself to people and talk to people. And everywhere we go, people come talk to me and then I make relationships. And so there were a lot of baptisms that happened while he was gone that were people I was working with, my baptisms, you know, for my mission. And so when he came home and there's certain people I'm working with, I think that actually was helpful for him to see. I mean, maybe to speak out to parents out there. Yeah. When they're on their mission, be a missionary too, because when they come home, they need to see what it looks like to be a missionary when you're a member. Now, he always saw that our life, because our family has led a life of missionary work, really.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the things that we've done. I mean, even the BBC show, everything that we've done was all missionary to help just spread good to the world. Anyway, but when I was actually reaching out and serving and ministering to other people, and he got to be part of it and see it when he came home, I felt like that helped you.
Yeah, oh, it totally did. And I mean, like, just really briefly going off, like, on my mission too, right? A quote really hit me by Elder Uchtdorf. He said, "You're rarely going to find something you're not looking for," right? And so as a missionary, you're looking for it, right? You're talking to every person, trying to see if they'd be interested in what you have to share, right? And so that, and I shared it with so many people on my mission too, trying to get members to do missionary work, right? That you're rarely going to find something you're not looking for, right? And so if you're like, yeah, I want to do missionary work, right? That's a goal. It's a great goal, right? But what's your plan, right? And I implemented it in my mission, and obviously I try every single day to do this too, but ask, right? Ask for the opportunities, and then they will come, but when they come, you actually have to act, right? And so look for those opportunities because they're all over, right? There was an area where I didn't have a lot of service opportunities. I love service, like yard work, and I remembered that, and I was like, oh, well, I'm not asking for them, and so therefore I'm not really looking for them, so they're not happening, right? And so I started asking, and that very morning I asked the first person. We knocked on the first door, and I heard this screeching in the neighbor, and he was pulling a washer out of his house. I was like, no way, right? The moment I asked,
you started singing.
I saw it, yeah, and it carried through my whole mission, which was awesome. So when you ask, the Lord will answer, but you have to act on what he gives you too.
Yeah. And
action's a big part of self-government.
So one of those things that kind of comes into play with all these different pieces that we're talking about of being able to grow and understand vision and then have the purpose and take those next steps is a concept in one of your books, which is specifically roles.
Right.
Understanding what our roles are, really defining, right? Defining them so that way we can understand them. How would you explain to somebody what a role really is?
Oh, yeah. So a role is, let's talk about what it's not first.
Perfect.
Okay. A role is not a responsibility. That's important because I think in modern times, people have really kind of gotten down on the idea of roles as if that somehow traps people.
Yeah, I'm restricted.
Yeah. Specifically targeted toward women, right? Okay. Where it's like, you're a mother. Oh, that means that you can't do this. You can't do this. You have to do this. Whoa. Those are just responsibilities. Anybody can make dinner. I mean, it is true. I make dinner more than my husband because it tastes better than when he makes it.
True.
I mean, if you got the gift, use it. Yeah. Okay. But that's a responsibility. Anybody can make dinner. Okay. I could outsource that. It's not a role. If I go and pick up from McDonald's, which I never do, but if I go and pick up from McDonald's, is McDonald's the mother because they made dinner? No, absolutely not. So we have to remember that on the mission, when somebody has a role as maybe a trainer or as a district leader or a sisters.
teacher.
What's the
Sister training
STL?
leader.
Yeah, yeah. Or as an STL, a sister training leader, or a zone leader, or an AP or assistant AP, or whatever it is that they have that are those specific roles, because those are roles, and with those roles come responsibilities. But we have to remember that the role is more of who you are to the other person. Okay, so to everyone here, to you and him, I am a woman. That's how you see me. That's how you relate to me. That's who I am. Okay? I could try to convince you of something else, but it wouldn't make a big difference in your brain because that's how you see me. I am married, so that makes me a spouse. I am a wife. I have children. That makes me a mother. These are all self-evident things. Once I get married, it's self-evident that I'm a wife. Once I have a child, it's self-evident that I'm a mother. Now I have grandchildren, so now it's self-evident that I'm a grandmother. Okay, and so these are all different roles. I have a sister role, a friend role, all, and I head a company, and I head a nonprofit. So I have a president role. Right, exactly. So there's all these different things that have different roles, and that's the way that people see me in a certain context. Okay, so as a mother, I am going to make dinner, but my real role is I'm the heart and hearthstone of my family. I am a nurturer, first and foremost. We learned that in the proclamation, right? But we also just know that's just women give life and they feed and they nourish.
Like your cooking example, if you have it, you give it, right?
Right, exactly. But that doesn't mean if my husband was an amazing cook, I'd be like, go. That would be, we'd be sharing it. He sometimes has been working on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the big difference, is that it's who you are to other people. So he's my son. So whether he's on the mission or whether he's home, whether he's married with 4 children, I am going to see him and feel about him as a person who is my son. That won't ever stop. And that's sometimes hard to navigate for people because it's like, well, wait, now I'm an adult and when I was a little boy and I was your son, you would tell me, brush your teeth, eat your veggies. And
now you still tell them that.
Sometimes I do still tell him eat veggies. I mean, last night I was like, you got veggies on that plate. Anyway, it's true. Old habits die hard. Yeah. But he has to recognize that's her role. I'm not going to take offense by that. She's like watching out for me. That's what she's always done.
That's out of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he knows that there's this love that's in there. But also I'm going to go, okay, his next phase of life. So phases are also in there, right? His next phase of life and entering into an adulthood thing, my role has to look slightly different, right? I've got to now say, well, I mean, you're an adult, so you can figure this out. If you want to talk to me about anything, I'm here to consult for anything. If you want advice, come ask it. And he does. He comes and asks because he knows that I'm not going to give him bad advice. I'm not going to be self-serving because I'm his mom. And for his whole life, he'll know that. Yeah. That I'm going to hold that identity in his heart, even if he doesn't need me to tell him what to wear to the wedding that we're going to or whatever it is, Yeah.
And I wanted to jump in and just ask this. We're running low on time, but there are so many roles and, just in our beliefs and our culture, our community, where we believe that people have the capacity to be anything that they want. And I think that that's become more of a push where women can be whatever they want. Men can be whatever they want. We can have these different roles, these different titles. We can have these different things. But in your book, and forgive me, I'm forgetting if it's in Parenting at House United or in Roles, but you specifically talk about that you chose to focus more on the role of mother and wife and woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because those are the most self-evident things in my life. And those are the things that lead me to the greatest truth. If I'm in alignment with who I self-evidently am, I'm going to find a lot more peace. I think we get caught up in the word want and we really overuse it, and it makes it so that we miss the mark. Identity really doesn't have anything to do with what you want. And we have to embrace that. We really do. Identity is all about self-evident things that you can, like, it just is. It's concrete. Mm-hmm. And also who you ought to be. So ought and want, 2 different things. Want is just all about you.
Yeah.
Your power,
Selfish.
your success, your ability to control everything around you, or your entitlement to control everything around you. But ought suggests duty, purpose, somebody else who knows the best version of you that you are supposed to be. So it also suggests progress. Want is like, how am I going to change everything around me to get? Ought is, how am I going to change me to become the truth that I'm supposed to be?
Yeah.
Two totally different things. When you focus on the ought, you find true power. When you focus on the want, you're seeking after a false kind of identity, a false kind of power. You're going to have to try to convince people for the rest of your life that you are whatever this is, and you're going to feel like you have to get a certain amount of attention for it and everything else. But in reality, if you go toward the ought, the true power comes, and then you end up inspiring all the people around you.
Yeah.
And when you're on the mission, if you give your whole heart to the Lord and you say, I'm all in, I'm going to covenant on this thing, you find the ought there. And when you come back home and people start telling you, well, what do you want? That can be incredibly misleading. The ought never goes away. The ought should always be there. And if you keep focusing on that relationship with Him and you express that to your parents, that that's what you're focusing on, hopefully they're supportive of that. I know there's a few parents sometimes that aren't, because they don't get it themselves. They're just living for their own self all the time. And that could be hard on a missionary that's just had a really amazing experience living in the ought space, but don't forget that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was so insightful. Porter, I know that something was going on in your head just now. Just as a closing comment, what would you like to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off of the ought and the want, right? If you have your priorities straight, right, like I said, if you covenant, right, to do this thing and you put your full heart into your mission, your want becomes the ought, right? And so then...
Our will is swallowed up in the will of the Father.
Exactly. If you forget yourself and you go to work, right, then those things that you want, right, are your priorities switch and those oughts become your wants, right? And that's a whole life, right? You keep your priorities straight. You continue to work hard. One of the main things for me is just keeping those habits that I have, right, or that I had on my mission, those righteous habits, right? Reading the Book of Mormon every single day, that's huge, right? Because maybe I did it less before, but I had made that habit on my mission, and that's an ought, right? We should do that.
And other scriptures too.
Yeah, other scriptures too, and it became a want, right? Something that I make a priority in my day. That I actually I signed a contract with my mission president to do that every single day for the rest of my life. But it's something I wanted to do. He said, "All right, here's a contract. You don't have to sign it, right? Yeah. Because I don't want you to break a promise." And so it became something that I wanted to do, so I signed it, right? So these things, right? Keeping yourself busy with those righteous habits, with those priorities. I think that helped me the most coming home, probably, is really keeping yourself busy. A lot of missionaries are like, oh, I've been working hard for 2 years, right? I just want to break, right? And I had those same thoughts. And then I had one day that I was like, all right, nothing to do. This is great. It was horrible. I hated it. I was like, man, I got to do something, right? And so just don't stop, right? Like, obviously you can sleep a little more, you can rest, right? Rest your body, but don't stop progressing is the main thing.
Yeah.
Right?
And I love that, because one thing that we talk about a lot with our return missionaries is one of the greatest detriments to your progress is not doing. Just coming home and catching up and playing the video games, watching the movies, to where you were before. Falling back. But at the same time, there are a lot of people that say you have to keep busy. And there's a difference, in my opinion, of having purpose and finding purpose and developing, right? And being busy, right? And I think that there's in you, right, as you're explaining that, you aren't talking about the busy for busyness sake, You were talking about having and continuing to provide value, contributing to your mission, fulfilling yourself, being purposeful, and having a plan and moving forward and taking actions. And
I used to say to him when he was young, well, all the children, I would say, I'd come into a room and I would say, what are you doing that's useful? And they'd be like, oh, well, I'm working on my, Lego skills because that helps me with whatever, or whatever. But to ask
working on my
yourself,
sleeping skills.
I came up with a useful skill right there.
yeah, right. This will help me in my future career, and it will. He's going into construction management, but to think to yourself, what am I doing that's useful?
Yeah.
Captain Moroni was called one of the most useful, like Alma described him as being so incredibly useful. What a great term to use for a person and for yourself.
Yeah. Love that. Well,
I do have one other thing. I don't
Chloe,
know if that's
take
okay.
it.
I had one other thing I wanted to share about roles that I feel
we'd
like
love
is
to hear it.
important. So whenever my children are switching phases of life, it's time for one of those talks about the roles. What's upcoming? What do you want to accomplish? Those types of things. And hopefully parents are having those conversations with their young adults that are coming home and transitioning from mission. But, just to have a conversation like we did about, okay, so now you're back in the house with mom and dad because he's the youngest one. So he's the only one there. What do we want that relationship to be like? What are our roles now? What do we want to do to exemplify our roles? How do we want to live? What do we want it to be? And he's not the type of person that's going to be like, well, I want my role to be I just get taken care of by you for everything. Like, I'm just going to be the leech. He's not going to take that role. He's going to say, oh, I know I'm supposed to do stuff. I'm supposed to prepare for my future and grow up and get ready for university life and get ready for the next phase. And he's like, well, these are my next phases. I got to get ready. And that's a really important discussion to have. So I would suggest to, if there's missionaries watching this, if there's parents, have the discussion about what role, how it's supposed to feel between you, not necessarily all the little responsibilities per se, although sometimes you have to get down to the nitty gritty if nobody's lifting a finger. But also, let them have that opportunity to come to you, maybe if you haven't had that conversation too. So if the missionaries' parents haven't said, hey, let's talk about our roles now that you're home, then I would say as a missionary, go to your parents and say, can we talk about our roles? Why not? Just open the door. Yeah. Your parents will be blown away. They'll be like, roles? I don't know. I mean, some parents have not thought about that themselves.
At all.
Yeah. And so this will be incredibly enlightening conversation.
Yeah. And then the other benefit is that these missionaries that have come home, they've had this very uncomfortable conversation with Elder Peck about what they can do and how their role is and what they need to do better. So they're going to be more comfortable with it, right?
Right.
Return missionaries, they learn and develop great skills on their mission, and oftentimes it's just snuffed out as they come home. And that's our hope in bringing you on this interview, is being able to help keep that fire alive and help promote and teach and inspire, not require people to keep doing those things. Right?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think if people really listen to all the principles that have been discussed today in this interview, that they're going to find themselves really empowered to feel in control of themselves. And that's what self-government's all about.
Yeah. Nicholeen, where can people go if they're interested in learning more about you and the philosophies and wanting to develop more about, teaching self-government and taking on that journey?
Absolutely. So teachingselfgovernment.com, you have to write the whole thing out.
Okay.
There's trainings there for, of course, parenting, but there's also stuff that can help with your own personal self-government as well, which could be beneficial. And then there's YouTube, and I have a lot of videos on YouTube related to your own personal self-government.
Are there any classes that you think would be particularly helpful, one that's kind of jumping out that you think would be beneficial to people?
Yeah, there's one called Dare to Take Command.
Dare to Take Command.
About personal self-government. There's also a YouTube video called The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success. Okay. And that video is really powerful. That will help in relationships and just getting yourself not falling into traps.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us and engaging in this interview with us. We'd love to hear your comments down below about what stood out to you, what you want to improve, what you want to take action on, and we'll keep that discussion alive. So comment down below what your perspectives were.